Jeremy Story is a candidate for House District 10. He joins us today. Good morning. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate y'all doing these interviews.
You bet. Let's start, first of all, explain to our audience your reason for running.
Yeah, real simple. I have watched for too long and being involved in different aspects of political life. People go to Congress and say they're going to do one thing and then not do it. And they often don't do it for one simple reason, especially on the Republican side. Oftentimes, they're lacking courage. They face pressure from Washington, D.C., special interests, donors, whatever, and they cave and they do not stand for the things they said they were going to. So I want to go to make change and to be able to stand for the things that I have always stood for because I have a track record of standing in the midst of pressure.
Explain to us your experience that you've had within legislative processes.
Yeah, sure. I was the chaplain of the Republican Party of Texas for 4.5 years. And then right after that, the last 2 years, I've served as the state Republican executive committee member from Brazos County and the surrounding counties for Senate District 5. And part of that, I was appointed to be on the Legislative Priorities Committee, where we work to accomplish the top 8 priorities of the Republican Party platform in the Texas legislature. And in that committee, I was awarded by my fellow peers on the SREC one of the legislative priority pins, which is I was only a few people out of the whole SREC that awarded that successfully advocated for many of our legislative priorities. And that means oftentimes stepping and working in ways to advance amidst, say, opposition from Democrats. But also it means sometimes corralling Republicans when they choose to run the other direction and don't enforce our priorities. And we have to work to make sure that they do. And so I have a lot of experience there, plus many other things. For example, I served on the board of the National Day of Prayer for 13 years. I was in and out of DC constantly. I understand the wickedness and dysfunction there, and also understand how to bring change to it. I serve on the board of Intercessors for America, which is the largest Christian organization in the country, mobilizing millions of Christians a year to pray for and take action in the federal and state governments. And I've served on that board for 16 years on their executive board. So I also have a degree in constitutional law from in government, and so I have a lot of interest and involvement in the government.
So let's talk about that then. Top 3 legislative priorities for the district.
Sure. For legislative priorities I was referring to are the ones for the Republican Party of Texas, referring to specifically the state legislature. But in terms of my priorities for the federal government, some of them are similar. One, I always say it real simple: secure the family, secure the economy, and secure the border. Those are big top issues. There's many other issues, but for me, I'm a very conservative Christian. I am very much for stopping a lot of the things the federal government has done to demolish the traditional family. I also believe that stems into education as well. Our education dollars that are going to universities across the country, particularly those universities that are using those education dollars to do crazy grants that are actually projects that are of no good to anyone. They're also oftentimes providing degrees that are not marketable, and they're doing so at a non-market friendly price. I think that if these universities are going to continue to convince people to fight America and won't teach people our basic values, they're welcome to continue doing that as private entities, but they don't need to be doing it with federal funding. So we need to be way more holding them accountable with these massive grants and loans that we do. And on the high school and elementary school level, I advocate for making sure that we remove the Department of Education from the federal government, and we push that money down to the states with high accountability to make sure that we are innovating new things in education and giving parents more choices. And I have spent 28 years working in the education sphere across the country, so I understand all different levels of it, and I'm pretty passionate about that. In terms of the economy, we're spending $37 trillion debt right now. We have $37 trillion debt. It'll probably be up to $39 trillion soon. It's completely, totally unsustainable. We're at 124% in our GDP to debt ratio. Just in the year 2000, it was 58%. So in 26 years, we've doubled it, more than doubled it. And so this is not sustainable for even our national security. And we need to do things like vote on the budget in pieces as opposed to in monster bills. We also need to not do ongoing continuing resolutions. That just passes the buck forward. And I will be an advocate for that kind of fiscal discipline, and also join with other Congress people who I know already agree with me on that, and encourage others who don't have the courage to speak out to gain that courage, so that we can begin to deal with the federal debt that is crippling our country and causing massive inflation.
Well, let's talk about families. Inflation and rising costs are hitting families every day. What steps would you take to lower everyday expenses like grocery, like housing, energy
Yeah.
bills, and taxes for middle class?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest reasons why we have such inflation is out of control government spending. Honestly, that when the government spends crazy amounts of money, you have inflation. They're basically creating dollars by fiat currency, basically saying, hey, it's worth this because the government says it's worth this. Well, the problem is that the financial markets don't agree. And so, as we saw just in the recent years, we saw our bond rating for the first time ever in the history of our country drop down just a smidge. But if it continues to drop down like that, then we're going to have lots of financial problems. The way we resolve that is by reducing spending. Things like when we had the COVID era, and we literally sent a check to every single American, that has caused and spurned massive and massive inflation. We cannot do these types of things. We have to be disciplined. It means we're going to have to look at each section of the budget and reduce that. That is the number one driver of housing affordability, groceries, all those things that the federal government at least has been involved with is just out of control spending. On the state level, it's property taxes. And those property taxes are primarily coming from out of control spending of school districts and out of control bonds from school districts that need to be brought under control. But that's not a federal issue.
That's not a federal issue. The president has talked about sending checks out. They may not say COVID on it, but would you agree with it just because President Trump says it's a good idea?
Most people who know me, I mean, I don't want to in any way, I would say in terms of that, I don't know exactly which particular program you're talking about in terms of the checks. I think he has tied one of those things to potential increase from tariffs. But in terms of your underlying question, which is, would I do something just because Trump says so? No. If you know anything about me, and if the people who do across the state of Texas know that I'm a principled grassroots conservative, which means that I follow principle, not power or names. So if leaders in my party are following the same conservative principles that the Republican Party espouses, I'm their best friend. If for some reason they were to depart, then no, just because someone's name is behind it doesn't mean that I follow it. I'm constantly evaluating legislation and proposed policies in light of what I believe conservative values are in our government. And I'm not afraid, obviously, to stand against the Democrats, but I'm also not afraid to talk to Republicans if they begin to deviate. Let me give you an example of how I did that here in Texas. In Texas, as on the member of the Legislative Priorities Committee, we had a bill that was in the House, considered by the legislature, that's also a federal issue that President Trump was just rightfully addressing, which is foreign entities buying lands, and in particular buying land around our military bases. We were working with a bill in the House and in the legislature. This particular bill had a caveat in it that said, "Well, you can't buy land and you can't do all these things, which are good ideas, I believe." But it then said, "Exception: if you have a temporary visa, you can buy land." Well, the problem was the way that it was written, that would allow almost anybody to get around all the regulations and basically made the bill fruitless. So myself and other members of our Legislative Priorities Committee worked hard behind the scenes to communicate with our Republican colleagues that this was not going to benefit Texans. And as a result, that section was removed from the bill. And now we have a very great bill that President Trump is even beginning to work with on the federal level to say that similar things need to happen on the federal level. So just because a Republican says something doesn't mean that that it's the right thing, or just because a bill is proposed by a Republican doesn't mean it can't be made better.
Many in the district are veterans or have military ties. What would you do to improve veterans' health care, their benefits, and their support services?
Sure. My family has had a long-standing history of serving in the military. My father served in the military. My uncle served in the military. My grandfather was at Normandy, went through France into Germany. I grew up down the street from him and him telling me stories every single week. It felt just multiple times a week about those experiences. So I have a personal passion for this. I think that oftentimes the VA is causing massive amounts of delays for people that need help. And I think we need to actually analyze that. We need to look at it. We need to see where those problems are, and we need to fix them. And we need to have people that have courage to do so. The reason why things don't happen in DC is not because people don't know the right ideas sometimes. Oftentimes, it's because people lack the political courage to actually do something about it. Or they just want to, quote, stay in their lane and play it safe. That is not who I am. I'm not running for Congress to play it safe or to build some personal career. I have no interest in that whatsoever. I believe that whatever power is given to us by the voters needs to be used to better the lives of the voters. And that means I need to take risk And it's not about me, it's about them. And so the reason why, like I said, things like this we haven't seen repair in the VA in ways that we need to is because we need people in Congress who have the political courage to act when they're getting special interest pressure and threats and all those sorts of things from other people to say, no, I'm going to do the right thing. And I'm going to do the right thing even if nobody sees it. And that's who I am. That's who I've always been. That's why I believe getting endorsements from all the grassroots groups across the state, many of them, because I am the proven grassroots candidate in this race.
District 10 includes Texas A&M and a growing semiconductor investments as well. What specific federal policies or funding would you push to boost higher education, job training, and tech manufacturing in the district?
Well, I think what we want to do in terms of higher education is that's pretty much the major focus on your question, right?
Well,
In terms of when you're saying
maybe.
trade
I mean,
schools and
we want to make this a good environment for semiconductor folks to want to come in and have facilities here. That doesn't necessarily mean a college education, but go ahead with your point.
right, and you also have trade schools, you have associate degrees, you have 4-year degrees. It can mean a lot of different things, but I'm saying we're talking about secondary education beyond high school. Just want to make sure I'm
Sure.
clarifying. So yes, I think the federal government can be involved in improving that in great ways. There is major. I have more experience in this area than any of the other candidates in the race. I have worked among college campuses coast to coast for 28 years. I've worked on colleges everywhere. I founded a national nonprofit that has literally trained tens of thousands of students and worked with leaders and united leaders on college campuses coast to coast. In fact, just there in A&M, one of the things that I've been involved with for a while, the National Collegiate Day of Prayer, was hosted from Rudder Auditorium to 4,300 colleges across the country and then broadcast across the world. So I have a lot of knowledge about colleges. And I'll tell you something, the federal government needs to hold these colleges accountable. We're dumping tons and tons of money into these schools, and they're not providing degrees that are actually many times advancing our economy or advancing people's jobs, and kids are graduating with debt and no marketable skills. We must stop that because it's putting our country in debt. It's putting kids in debt, and the only one that's benefiting are these universities, and they're increasingly teaching kids things that are not even helpful to everyday citizens. We must hold them accountable, or they need to not get our funding. In a country like ours, you can do whatever you want as a private entity, but that doesn't mean the federal government needs to help you do it. So we can take some of those funds and apply them to trade schools. This is a major problem right now because colleges are not providing just basic trade skill type sort of things. We need to be able to improve those programs. Those are showing greater return for the dollar when people invest in it. They're getting out of school with little to no debt, and they're actually able to get jobs that are actually paying many times way more than those with college degrees. So we need to be able to broaden our perspective on that. I actually created a program across America that we're working on right now that actually works with students across the country and helps them discern what they're good at, the ways that God made them, and then helps them find careers within the ways that God made them and find the right college, negotiate tuition, find the right trade school, find the right pathways to help them get into where God made them in life. Because this is, I mean, literally, it's bankrupting families. And so we need to be able to change that. I know a lot about this, more than I can discuss in an interview, but I would say that the federal government needs to exercise pressure and leverage with our federal loan system and our grant system and universities to reorient how higher education works in this country towards marketable degrees or marketable skills.
You mentioned a moment ago the work that you'd done in Austin on land being owned by people who are not United States citizens. But let's talk about the ranchers and the farmers, the rural areas of District 10, protecting those property rights. But beyond that, how do you support agriculture, oppose the federal overreach in there?
Yeah. One of the things is you don't vote for things that increase federal oversight more and more. The federal government is way, way, way too involved in the daily affairs of Texans. And I'm not a fan of the federal government. I believe the federal government needs to be way smaller. I mean, way smaller than it is today. We do that by removing departments that are unnecessary, but also just in general, we don't vote for things that increase the oversight.
I'm going to go ahead and let you tell me which departments we need to get rid of. You've mentioned education. What else?
Yeah. Well, that's something we would have to evaluate piece by piece. There's actually a committee in the House that deals with waste, in addition to another one that deals with ethics. Both of those would be very helpful in this particular thing. But I want to go back to your original question in terms of how do we support agriculture? Because I think that's really vital. And we can go back if you want to waste in the federal government. But I live on a 68-acre ranch. I run and I do a national nonprofit, but my wife and I also run a for-profit that's a farm-to-table restaurant. And the whole purpose of it is to help people see where their food comes from. And we run an agritourism business with the lodge and event center out here that help people learn where their food comes from. So I am not just someone out of theory saying, oh, I want to help the agriculture, maybe because I live in Austin or something. I just believe it's a strong thing. I live on a cattle ranch. I live surrounded, as I look out my office here at Hay Farm, and we have a hay barn. We have another barn over here. I have, my wife's building a large chicken enclosure out back. We have an orchard. So I understand agriculture because I live agriculture, not because it's some idea that I think is cool. And my family also comes from that. My family were some of the original settlers in Texas, in Nacogdoches, that came here with land grants, still own land north of Nacogdoches as a ranch. Chicken farm. My grandmother farmed peanuts and cotton and chickens. She didn't graduate from eighth grade because she started working on the farm and had 16 siblings. So I understand agriculture, and it's very important that we have, from a federal level, food security in our country. And what's happening increasingly in our country, it is a national security issue. It's not just like limited to rural Texas. We are so dependent on foreign sources of food. But in our own country, we need to beef up our own ability to produce not just semiconductors, but also food itself, because food itself is even more vital. You can't even produce semiconductors if you can't feed your people. And if we were to get into some sort of conflict with some of these places where we, like Russia and other places where we're getting a lot of wheat and other things, we could be in serious problems. We depend on Texans for agriculture, and we need to continue to move forward. Increasingly right now, beef prices are on the rise, and we're having to import from South America. That is a shame. Texas should be leading the way, and federal government should make it more and more possible for us to produce beef right here in our own state and also in our own country. I'm passionate about this because food security is national security, and there are things we need to do for the federal government to help supplement those things and improve those things, and also even blockade foreign food from getting into our markets so that American farmers have better opportunities to succeed.
Texas.
Plus, let me say another thing.
Sure.
I mean, because this is a big deal, what you're talking about. That's why I wanted to go back to agriculture. Right now, we have conglomerates taking over agriculture. We need to do, through the Small Business Administration, through a Department of Agriculture, we need to do everything we can to support and increase the ability for small businesses that are agricultural, that we can diversify agriculture so that it's not just a few major companies promoting a lot of our food and other things. We need to be able to diversify that. That means to have more small business farmers in the market, and to make that easier for entry and to stay in the market, so we can create more competition and also create more diversity of support, so that if you just have one big major conglomerate go down, it doesn't affect you as much from a food security issue.
Texas mid-decade redistricting in 2025 reshaped Texas 10 and other districts. Do you think it was necessary and fair, or just gerrymandering?
Well, I'm very familiar with this because I'm a member of the State Republican Executive Committee, or was until I ran for Congress. And the answer is it was completely 100% legal and completely 100% okay and completely done throughout the history of our country. See, the history of that is that it started with a court case in Galveston, where we were originally under an understanding that we had to actually gerrymander things according to race, so that we would design certain districts for certain races. That is not an American ideal at all. But in terms of designing different districts based around political ideals and political parties, that's been done since George Washington. There is nothing new under the sun in that regard. So what the court said in Galveston, by the way, the main guy who brought this court case was black. His name is Robin Armstrong. He is the Republican National Committee man and a personal friend of mine. And he brought it basically saying, listen, the way we've been gerrymandering according to race is racism. We need to stop that. And we need to allow for political diversity, right? So you can actually have different parties redistrict based on political views, but there's a difference. Race is an immutable characteristic. You are born with it, right? It's who you are in that sense. But political characteristics are chosen. And so that's why we can change districts based on what you believe and who you are. And parties have been doing this since the beginning of our country, but we shouldn't be designing districts around immutable characteristics like race. And so I'm 100% for the Republican Party being able to change those districts. And quite honestly, if any Democrat party or whatever, it is your right in our country to design districts on the congressional level based upon political viewpoint. It's been done long before now. People are making it out like this is a new idea. Listen, just read your history books. It goes back to the big foundings of our country, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Would you support independent commissions for future redistricting?
What do you mean by an independent commission?
Well, in other words, then it would not have elected officials sitting there making these decisions.
No, No, not really. Not if they're making the final choice. No, I don't. No way. But here's why. There's so many of these appointed commissions, which basically means that you're taking the voters out of it. See, the great thing about elected officials is they're elected. So if you don't like what they're doing, you don't like their redistricting, you don't like the way they did something, you have the opportunity as a voter to speak out and elect someone else. When it's an appointee, it's behind the scenes and it's not connected to the grassroots voters. So no, I do not support an independent commission, especially since the Constitution says that it should be the state legislature, not some unappointed board, some backroom, deal. I don't support anything like that. I'm 100% for government transparency. I'm known across our state because I was our former chaplain for speaking out to make sure that the government is transparent. And one of the things I'm passionate about is I don't like when backroom deals are done that squash the everyday American. And one of the reasons why I make politicians nervous sometimes is because I will speak out and I will say this isn't right for the American people. We need to press forward and be more transparent as a government. I don't support any of those kind of backroom kind of things where you got an appointed board rather than an elected board. I think what we did with our appraisal districts in Texas, for example, even though it's not a federal issue, was a good idea to allow for more of those appraisal district members to be elected rather than appointed, because that makes them more accountable to the people.
Certainly.
We should do, by the way, the same thing with the Secretary of State. I know this is not a federal issue, but the Secretary of State should be elected too,
okay,
and not just appointed by the governor.
But it's not a federal issue. So anything we have not covered today?
Well, I mean, you've covered a lot of things. I would say you have to evaluate why things are stuck in Congress. And then if you're evaluating me as a candidate, I have traveled the entire country for decades. And since I was a young man, and I started a national college ministry that it was a partnership between A&M and UT that then spread all over the country. And what we would do is we would unite leaders campus by campus by campus, all these different leaders of organizations and churches and professors and everything, getting them to work together to help change their campus. Time and time again, people would say, you can't do this. It won't work. That's not how things work. It's never worked. It won't work. You can't do it on the national level. You can't do it on the regional level. Well, guess what? Here we are 30 years later, and we did it. I believe with God's help, but we did it all across the country. We saw people united. We saw college works and organization and churches change. We saw campuses transformed all the way up to the national level. Even with what we saw at the Texas A&M campus last year, where we started this. This was one of the projects that our ministry worked on in addition to other ministries, the Collegiate Day of Prayer. I was one of the co-founders of it. People said at the beginning, Jeremy, you'll never be able to get everybody together to make sure that churches have adopted every single one of the colleges in America. It's never happened. Well, guess what? It did, and it's happened multiple years. And last year at Texas A&M campus, it was broadcast to the world because now it's going all over the world. So why does that apply to Congress? It applies in every way. People tell you Congress is broken. It can't be changed. You can't do anything as a freshman. They get all the reasons why things don't work. I've faced those sorts of things all day long, my entire life. And what I do is I bring together people to produce change in hard environments. Trust me, I've worked at Harvard, I've worked at UCLA, I've worked at easier campuses. I've worked at hard places though, New York City, all those places. And I can work to bring people together, even in very wicked, hard, tough places where they're stuck. And I believe I can bring change. And so I think what voters need to look at is not just what people believe, but what have they done in the past? And are they able to bring the change they're talking about? Do they have the courage to do, the fortitude, the willpower, the ability? And I would say that my history as our chaplain in the state party, my history as a grassroots person on the SREC, as a nonprofit leader, as a for-profit leader, in all of these ways shows that I have the history to do things and be a part of doing things and building coalitions to do things that other people say are impossible. And I want the opportunity to bring change to Congress, to bring change to our federal government so that we can live better lives here in Texas. And I will promise you that every moment that I'm in Congress, I'm thinking about you, and no matter what is done behind the scenes, it will be the same person in front of you as it is behind the scenes to advocate for you. I know how those rooms work. I hate the fact that backroom deals are made that sell out the American people. I will not be a part of that ever. There is no amount of pressure in Washington, D.C. that will bend me. I will work to bend Washington, D.C.
Do you have a website?
Yes, votejeremystory.com. And my name is spelled Jeremy, and then the last one's like a book, STORY, votejeremystory.com. I'm endorsed by Moms for America, endorsed by a bunch of state Republican executive committee members, many precinct chairs, the college Republicans across this state, lots of people. In terms of the True Texas Project, the Central Texas Conservatives, Republican Conservatives, and so on. And the reason is people know I mean business. And when I say I won't sell out, I won't sell out, and I will press forward. And when I say I'll get things done, they know I will because they've seen me do it in the past. It's not just about believing the right things, it's being able to act and have the courage to do the right things that you believe.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate your time as well, sir.